welcome back for another deep dive. You know how much we love getting into the nitty-gritty of tech news, right? Well, today we're looking into something that's honestly got us a little concerned.
Definitely concerning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it all started with a couple of articles we saw over on Tom's Hardware about Seagate hard drives being sold as new. But the thing is...
And you're going to want to hear this because it's kind of a wild story. These drives, well, they weren't exactly as new as they were being advertised. So we're going to dig into what we know so far and try to figure out what's going on and what it means for anyone out there shopping for hard drives.
So should we jump right in with how this whole thing started?
Let's do it. What sparked this whole investigation?
It all started with a reader over on Heise Day, which is a German tech website. This reader decided to check the smart data on two Seagate Exos hard drives he bought. They were 14 terabytes each, and they were sold as new.
Okay, so for anyone who's not familiar with smart data, think of it like a car's odometer, but instead of tracking miles, it tracks how many hours the hard drive has been running. Which makes sense, right? You want to know how much use a drive has had before you buy it.
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting. One of the drives had already been used for over 10,000 hours.
10,000? That's wild. That's like buying a new car that's already been driven across the country multiple times.
And it gets even crazier. The other drive had over 15,000 hours on it.
So these drives were definitely not new.
Not even close. And after this initial report came out, Heise received over 50 more reports from readers who had similar experiences. The drives ranged in size from 4 terabytes to 18 terabytes, with some having a staggering 50,000 hours of use.
50,000 hours? That's over 5 years of continuous use. That's insane. And these drives were purchased from a variety of retailers, including some pretty big names like Amazon and Mind Factory.
And here's where it gets even more concerning. Some of these retailers are actually on Seagate's official list of certified partners.
So it's not like people were buying these drives from some shady back alley dealer, right? These were reputable places you'd expect to get a genuine product.
Right. So naturally, Heise reached out to Seagate for a comment.
And what did Seagate have to say about this whole situation?
Well, their official response was that they did not sell or distribute these drives to resellers, and they recommend that customers only buy from their certified partners, which of course is kind of ironic considering.
Yeah, a lot of the people who got these used drives bought them from those certified partners.
Exactly. So that doesn't really solve the mystery of where these drives are coming from. But Seagate also mentioned their drive circularity program, which is essentially their program for refurbishing and reselling used drives.
Okay, so that sounds like a good thing, right? Promoting sustainability and all that. But how does that explain these drives with thousands of hours of use?
Well, there's a catch. Heise pointed out that Seagate claims to reset the smart data on these refurbished drives.
Wait, so they're basically wiping the odometer clean before they resell them?
Pretty much. If that's the case, then those drives showing thousands of hours of use couldn't have come directly from Seagate's refurbishment program.
So now we've got even more questions. Where are these used drives coming from? If Seagate is resetting the smart data on their refurbs, then something else is going on here.
And that's what we need to figure out. Is there some kind of loophole in the system that's allowing these used drives to be repackaged and sold as new?
This is starting to sound a little bit like a conspiracy theory.
Well, it's definitely a mystery.
Yeah.
And it's one that could have some pretty serious implications for consumers. So we need to get to the bottom of this.
Absolutely. All right, so we've laid out the problem. Let's move on and talk about what this actually means for someone who ends up with one of these mystery mileage drives. What are the real-world consequences of buying a used drive that's disguised as new?
Let's talk about that. Okay, so imagine this. You just bought a brand new 16 terabyte Seagate hard drive.
Ooh, yeah, shiny and new.
Exactly. It arrives, you install it, everything seems to be working perfectly.
Right.
But there's a hidden history that you don't see.
All those thousands of hours, it's already been running.
Yeah. And that's where the risk comes in.
Okay, so let's talk about those risks then. What are the real-world consequences for someone who unknowingly ends up with one of these drives?
Well, first and foremost, you're basically playing hard drive roulette.
That sounds a little dangerous.
It can be. A drive that's already been heavily used is much closer to the end of its lifespan.
So it's more likely to fail sooner.
Exactly. And when a hard drive fails, it could take all your precious data with it.
Photos, videos, documents, everything.
Gone. And that's a risk most people don't want to take.
Absolutely not. It's not just about the data loss either, right? There's also the ethical side of things.
You're right. It's a matter of principle. You're paying for a new product, but you're getting a used one.
It's like being told you're getting a 5-star hotel room and then ending up in a dingy motel.
Exactly. It's misleading. And then there's the issue of warranty.
Ah, yes,
Yeah.
the warranty.
Yeah.
What happens if one of these heavily used drives fails prematurely?
Will the warranty be honored? That's a good question. And it gets complicated if the drive was originally sold under different terms.
Like to a business with a different warranty agreement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Proving that you were misled could be tricky.
It sounds like a legal nightmare.
It could be. So there are a lot of potential downsides to ending up with one of these mystery mileage drives.
Definitely makes you think twice about hitting that buy now button.
It should. And it raises another question. Why would anyone go through the trouble of disguising used drives as new?
Yeah, that's what I've been wondering this whole time. What's the motivation behind this whole scheme?
Well, the simplest answer is profit.
Profit, of course. The almighty dollar.
Think about it. The markup on a new drive is much higher than what you could get for a used one, even if it's refurbished.
So there's a big financial incentive to push these used drives back into the market.
Exactly. And with the demand for storage constantly increasing, it's a lucrative business.
Makes sense from a purely financial standpoint, but it's still incredibly deceptive.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And there's another factor to consider. The disposal of used hard drives.
Oh, right. I hadn't thought about that.
It can be a real hassle. Properly getting rid of them can be costly and complex.
Because of data security concerns and environmental regulations.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just toss them in the trash. So some sellers might see this as an easier and more profitable solution.
Just refresh them and send them back out into the world as if they were brand new.
It's a shortcut, but it's one that could have serious long-term consequences.
For both consumers and the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So we need to be aware of this issue and take steps to protect ourselves.
absolutely. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about what we can actually do about this. How can we avoid ending up with one of these mystery mileage hard drives?
Great question. There are definitely some things you can do to minimize your risk. Let's go through them.
Okay, so we've talked about the problem and why it's so concerning. But now for the big question, what can we actually do about it?
Well, the good news is there are some steps you can take to protect yourself. Knowledge is power, right?
Right. So what's our first line of defense?
First off, don't skip the research. Before you buy any hard drive, especially online, take some time to do your due diligence.
Due diligence meaning?
Read reviews, compare prices, and check the seller's reputation.
Makes sense. You want to make sure you're buying from a reputable source. But what about when you're actually looking at a specific drive? Are there any red flags we should be looking for?
Absolutely. Pay close attention to the product description and the photos. Does the packaging look legit? Does anything seem off?
Like if the box looks beat up or something.
Exactly. Trust your gut instinct. If something feels fishy, it probably is. And remember that smart data we talked about earlier?
And the hard drive odometer.
Exactly. That's your secret weapon. There are free tools like Crystal Disk Info and HD Sentinel that can give you a detailed report on a drive's history.
So you can see how many hours it's been running, any errors it's encountered, things like that.
Precisely. Think of it like a car's maintenance record. It can reveal a lot about how that drive has been treated.
So we need to be a little bit like hard drive detectives.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask the seller questions. A legitimate business should be happy to provide more details about the product.
Like where it came from, its history, things like that.
Right. If they get defensive or evasive, that's a big red flag.
Noted. So research. Check the smart data. Trust your gut. Any other tips to add to our hard drive detective toolkit?
If you're still unsure about buying online, consider going to a local computer store where you can actually see and inspect the drive before you buy it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It might cost a bit more, but the peace of mind could be worth it.
Definitely. So those are some practical steps you can take as a consumer. But this is a bigger issue that needs to be addressed at a systemic level.
So what can be done to prevent this from happening in the first place?
Well, ideally, we need more transparency and accountability throughout the entire supply chain.
Meaning?
Retailers need to be more diligent about verifying the authenticity of their products, and manufacturers need to step up their efforts to track their drives and prevent them from ending up in the wrong hands.
It sounds like everyone involved needs to take responsibility.
They do. And we also need stricter regulations and penalties for those caught engaging in this kind of fraud. Right now, the incentive to cheat the system seems to outweigh the risks.
So it's kind of a Wild West situation.
In a way. But consumers have power too.
Yeah.
We can make a difference by demanding transparency and ethical practices from the companies we buy from.
So speak up, ask questions, and don't be afraid to hold those companies accountable.
Exactly. Our choices as consumers can have a real impact.
It's a good reminder that we can't just blindly trust the systems that bring us our electronic devices.
We need to be informed, vigilant, and maybe even a little bit skeptical.
Trust but verify, as they say.
Exactly. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. It's been quite the deep dive.
Hopefully our listeners are walking away feeling empowered, not paranoid.
Knowledge is power, after all.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you as always.
Likewise. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll be keeping an eye on this story as it develops, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for updates.
Stay curious out there, folks.